Blinkist is the app that helps you become a more well-rounded person by letting you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try it for free and get 25% off a subscription by going to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. Well, the battle against the coronavirus is not going to be ending anytime soon. If you've been following the numbers, you know that not only are the numbers in the United States in general really not looking good, disproportionately so, of course, among the unvaccinated, but we also have some states that are at their pandemic peaks now. They are at pandemic peaks now in terms of daily cases. They are in pandemic peaks now in terms of total hospitalizations, and the death numbers are going very much in the wrong direction. Again, mostly unvaccinated people. But there is this question of what about the vaccinated? Because there is no question that we are seeing breakthrough cases, which are mostly mild, but we're seeing breakthrough hospitalizations as well, although relatively fewer in number. And we're seeing breakthrough deaths as well. And there's early data from Israel showing that it starts to seem, it seems as though it starts maybe around 5-6 months. And then there's a noticeable drop off at the 8-month mark, that there is declining efficacy in these vaccines. And so the question of a third booster dose has been raised over the last several weeks and months. And we now have heard from the CDC. The U.S. will begin wide distribution of COVID booster shots next month, saying vaccine protection wanes over time. There's a good write-up about this on CNBC. And these are third doses for people who have already had 2 doses of Moderna or 2 doses of Pfizer, like I and many of you in the audience have as well. The article writes, the U.S. will start widely distributing COVID booster shots next month. As new data shows vaccine protection wanes over time, top U.S. health officials announced Wednesday. It is now, quote, very clear that immunity starts to fall after the initial 2 doses. And with the dominance of the Delta variant, quote, we are starting to see evidence of reduced protection against mild and moderate disease, according to the statement signed by CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. Let's go now to Rochelle Walensky speaking yesterday and listen to what she had to say.
Through the end of July and early August, 3 points are now very clear. First, vaccine-induced protection against SARS-CoV-2 infection begins to decrease over time.
Now, important, she's talking there about infection. Now, next, she will talk about the other elements.
Second, vaccine effectiveness against severe disease, hospitalization, and death remains relatively high.
Yes.
And third, vaccine effectiveness is generally decreased against the Delta variant. So let's jump into the data. On this slide, you will see 2 studies, one from New York and one an analysis of data from the Mayo Clinic. From May 3rd through July 25th, New York examined COVID-19 tests and linked them to individuals' vaccination status based on the state's vaccine records.
This is huge.
This allowed New York to study vaccine effectiveness against infection over time for more than 10 million New Yorkers of all ages. Vaccine effectiveness in May, early during the vaccine rollout in the state, was 92%. In the later months, further from vaccination, vaccine effectiveness declined to 80%. These data will be published in the MMWR today. The Mayo Clinic analysis looked at vaccine effectiveness for both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines.
So what is the point here? The point here is over time, efficacy wanes. And there's really 2 aspects to this. And this is we don't know the answer to this, but this is a really important thing to understand. The efficacy in the real world is in part waning because the virus variant that is dominant now is not the one that the vaccine was developed against. This is different than vaccine efficacy goes down against the live variant, the original variant against which the vaccines were designed. It may or it may not, but we don't yet have reason to believe that. And so this may well become like a flu shot type situation, where I'm scheduled to get my flu shot in a few days myself. The flu shot I will get in a few days is based on what was believed to be the dominant strain at the time that this year's flu shot started to be developed. I don't know if it's 6 or 8 months ago. And depending on how well that matches what's actually out there in this upcoming flu season, I will have a lower or higher degree of protection. And similarly, when we talk about the COVID-19 vaccine, the same question applies, which is how closely does the variant that is dominant match what the vaccines were designed for? So this is where we are going. And the guidance, as far as we understand it now, is going to be starting 8 months after your second dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. For me, I received my second dose February 26th, so I would become eligible on October 26th. And if that's the case and the vaccine is available, I will go and get a third shot because I want to not only protect myself, but protect people around me. There are, of course, people who have not gotten any vaccine and don't plan to, who are going to take this as an opportunity to say, now I'm definitely not getting the vaccine, even though they already definitely weren't getting the vaccine, because they will say this is just part of the plot to get us more and more and more doses forever. Well, when something becomes endemic like flu, that's the way it will sometimes work. And that's the way it does work with flu. So, of course, people who want to see a conspiracy will see one anywhere they want. They will see it in evidence and they will see it in the absence of evidence. And these are not really good faith actors that we can deal with in any serious way. But this is where we are right now. And many people are feeling, and understandably so, will this ever end? Like, is this ever going to go away? And the answer is, it may not ever go away as an endemic thing that is just circulating with peaks and valleys, sort of like flu. But if we get enough people vaccinated, and eventually it seems likely we would have a reformulated vaccine tailored to maybe the Delta variant, maybe to a variant that is still sometime in the future, we can get it under control from the standpoint of it being a pandemic. But certainly, things like masks on planes have been extended until January, at minimum until January. We are starting to see vaccine requirements at increasingly in different cities and states to go to restaurants, to go to indoor venues. This stuff is not going to end anytime soon. And of course, part of the reason is a whole bunch of people still are not interested in getting vaccinated. At least one doctor, and I'm going to talk about this next, is saying he will no longer treat unvaccinated patients. All right, I want to talk next about the things that different people are doing in response to what's going on with the coronavirus pandemic. There are people who, in their place of business, if they have a place of business and they have control over what goes on there, are saying my employees need to be vaccinated, or my customers need to be vaccinated, or you need a negative test if you're not vaccinated, or whatever. One Alabama doctor is now saying he is not going to treat unvaccinated people. He will not see unvaccinated patients in his office. Dr. Jason Valentine is a physician at Mobile's Diagnostic and Medical Clinic Infirmary Health, posted a photo on his Facebook page showing him next to a sign that says, effective October 1st, 2021, Dr. Valentine will no longer see patients that are not vaccinated against COVID-19. Since posting the sign, Valentine wrote, 3 unvaccinated patients asked where they could get a vaccine. No conspiracy theories, no excuses, just where do they go? Valentine had a blunt answer from those who asked him about his decision. If they asked why, I told them COVID is a miserable way to die, and I can't watch them die like that. Valentine said he's currently in the process of mailing a letter to patients about his decision. He posted a copy of the letter online. We do not yet have any great treatments for severe disease, he wrote, but we do have great prevention with vaccines. Unfortunately, many have declined to take the vaccine, and some end up severely ill or dead. I cannot and will not force anyone to take the vaccine, but I also cannot continue to watch my patients suffer and die from an eminently preventable disease. Therefore, as of October 1st, I will no longer see patients that have not been vaccinated against COVID-19. If you wish to keep me as your physician, documentation of your vaccination will suffice. If you wish to choose another physician, we will be happy to transfer your records. Now, a bunch of people wrote to me about this story and said, isn't this a violation of the Hippocratic Oath? Don't doctors have a duty to treat those who are in need of treatment? And the answer is yes. But this is not an emergency physician. This is primary care. This is someone who's saying, in my office, my roster of patients, will not include unvaccinated people. And this is not emergency medicine. This is not a doctor having someone showing up needing to be put on a ventilator in an emergency room. And he says, nah, I'm going to look away. I'm not going to provide you any treatment. This is not emergency medicine. This is primary care. So it's focusing on the Hippocratic Oath aspect of this is not an honest assessment of the situation. What we do need to be thinking about here is that there is a burden that is larger than it needs to be being placed on the medical system, being placed on providers, doctors, nurses, and others. And it is a perfectly reasonable thing to say, wait a second, if much of this, the vaccine's not perfect, okay? You could still get a case with the vaccine. You could end up in the hospital. You could end up dying even when vaccinated, but it dramatically reduces your odds. So if we have that as a possibility, what else can we be doing? What else can doctors be doing to say the burden needs to be reduced? Let's find a way to encourage people to go and get vaccinated. Now, I took a call on the show a couple of weeks ago where the viewer actually said, shouldn't, when we triage in an emergency room, take unvaccinated people and triage them lower priority than vaccinated people so that we don't say to the person who got into a car accident, your treatment will be delayed because of unvaccinated people? And my answer was, no, I don't see any way that you do that legally. I don't see any way that you do that morally or ethically from the standpoint of when you're in an emergency room situation, you're triaging based on severity and other factors. And I don't think that that would make sense. But increasingly, if primary care doctors want to say, hey, listen, at my office, if you want to be under my care, under primary care, if you want to come in because you might have a sinus infection or you have, headache or you have whatever reason people go into primary care, you need to be vaccinated because I need to reduce the burden. Then that is something that they can do. And many doctors could do this. And ultimately, people are going to have to make a decision. Do I want to have a primary care doctor and get the vaccine? Or do I want to remain unvaccinated and maybe be unable to find one? Now, of course, most primary care doctors are not going to do this. So it's really academic to say, what if every primary care doc did this? But good for this doctor. This doctor is doing something to try to encourage people to get vaccinated. At least 3 of his patients have said, I'm going to go and do it because I want to remain under your care. Send me your thoughts about this, as well as other ways that the medical community could encourage people to go and get vaccinated. You can find me on Twitter at @dpacman. We will be speaking very soon about our upcoming 1 billion views on YouTube milestone. It's an insane milestone for a show like ours. More on that upcoming. What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist. And what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books. They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month. And you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video. Let's remember that the David Pakman Show is independent media funded primarily by viewers and listeners like you. You can sign up and support today through the membership program at joinpakman.com. And you do get some really great perks, including commercial-free audio and video streams of the show every day, access to the bonus show, an extra program every single day, the members-only newsletter, the occasional member-only town halls, and so many other things. Grab a membership at joinpakman.com. I was thrilled to be back yesterday from my vacation. Many people really mad at me that I was gone for 10 days, even though we had guest hosts. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, but in so doing, we're going to go through some interesting posts from the David Pakman Show subreddit. There are now more than 32,000 of our viewers and listeners subscribed for free to the subreddit. You can find it at davidpakman.com/Reddit, whether you want to complain about my vacations, talk about Afghanistan, talk about healthcare policy. It's wide open, well moderated, respectful, mostly respectful discussion. davidpakman.com/Reddit. Here's just an example post. David needs to come back now. I miss him, which I love to see that. I really was flattered at the number of people that count on me and wanted me back during my vacation. It was flattering is really the only way I can describe it. And also, I got a bunch of really ugly messages from people. David, how dare you be on break? I watch your videos every day and you just leave and you're on vacation. Okay. I mean, I guess, yeah, the show is free, right? I mean, the show is free. I also got a couple of emails from people who thought I would or suggested that I cancel my trip like halfway through when the Afghanistan stuff happened. It's like, even if that made sense, does anybody know how complicated it is? Like at this point, you need COVID tests to get back to the country. Changing flights last minute is outrageously expensive, and accommodations. I mean, that seemed like an unreasonable expectation, but I'm going to focus on the positive, not the people threatening to never watch again because I took a vacation. The number of people that wrote me messages saying, David, when you were gone, I realized I really look forward to listening to the show and watching the clips each day. I love that. I'm flattered by that, and I'm glad to be back. Another post from the David Pakman Show subreddit about independent media. This is a really interesting post, actually. User Knower of Stuff asked, do you think a big issue with new media is that commentators at some point will have to choose between pandering to their audience rather than being objective and telling them what they need to hear or risk losing viewership? Yes, we've talked about this. You could describe that as the phenomenon of audience capture, where the entity, the show, the host becomes captured by the audience and has to do what the audience wants or expects rather than what they believe or believe is best. I have made a commitment, and I've talked about this before. We sometimes disagree. By we, I mean my audience with me or parts of my audience with me. We sometimes disagree about things. There's disagreement right now with some in my audience about Afghanistan. There's been disagreement in the past about all sorts of different issues. Sometimes, there's like a vaccine skeptical component of the audience. There's people in the audience who didn't like my view of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or whatever. But the promise I've made is I want to be the anti-grifter in the sense that I'm just going to tell you what I believe. And I'm not going to tell you what I think the audience wants to hear because I don't want to lose a portion of the... No. If there's any criticism of what I say on the show, it should be substantive because you disagree with me or think that I'm wrong, but not because anybody thinks that I'm coming up with a take that will be the best for the audience so that we don't lose viewership. That's never been what I've done. So that's been my commitment. I think I've stuck to it. Last post I want to highlight. Yes, I did have sort of one of these accidental portmanteaus yesterday. I used the word questionate and I meant questioning and vaccinate. I some kind of questionating. I put it together. And user Puza saying people should not be questionating the wisdom of getting inoculated against COVID. And I can absolutely agree with that. If people want to put that on Urban Dictionary, by all means, go ahead. But we should not questionate. Questionate would be questioning vaccination. Let's do it. Let's get ourselves vaccinated. All right. Join the discussion at davidpakman.com/Reddit. We have seen a lot of things get kind of wacky and backwards in the aftermath of Joe Biden pulling troops from Afghanistan. And of course, that created a vacuum in which the Taliban has retaken control of the country. Now, I'm not going to redo yesterday's segment where I outline my position on this in full. But in short, I agree with Joe Biden's decision. I said this yesterday. I think there would have been chaos whenever we ultimately left Afghanistan. But the Afghanistan incursion has been a failure. More U.S. involvement for more time wouldn't help anything. The longer we stay, the more money is spent to ultimately achieve nothing. Our involvement is a negative. It's not a positive. And one of the things that we're seeing is all sorts of people on the left, on the right, for different reasons, now say we have to go back into Afghanistan. That's one thing we're seeing. There's all of a sudden people saying, no, we got to go back. It was a mistake to leave. We've got to do more nation building and peacekeeping and world policing and all this stuff. Let's go back in. That's weird. But another of the strange things we're seeing, and I'm not even saying I know what to make of it, but another thing we're seeing is some really bizarre kind of like revisionist histories and apologizing for the Taliban, which has now taken control. Now, I will be the first to admit the Taliban is more complicated than just like one explanation, like Sharia law. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, Sharia law can mean different things in different countries, but there are now some people framing the Taliban as sort of like maybe kind of good. And I'm finding it really weird. And today we're going to look at a clip of British Chief of Defense Staff, General Sir Nick Carter. That's actually his title. I'm not like doing the Sir routine. General Sir Nick Carter, who was on Sky News talking about kind of like the Taliban's not that bad. And so let's just get into it. Check out the words he uses and how he describes the Taliban. Now, Carter was in Afghanistan in 2004, commanding British troops there, had additional deployments to Afghanistan. And remember, the Taliban is a radical group considered a terrorist group by multiple governments, including Canada, Turkey, and others. The U.S. has never recognized the Taliban government, although I don't believe the U.S. considers the Taliban a terrorist group. Trump was just negotiating with them months ago. So here we go. Let's take a look and check this out.
And how do you feel about collaborating with the enemy when they have carried out such atrocities against UK military personnel over the years?
I think you have to be very careful using the word enemy. I think people need to understand who the Taliban actually are. And of course, what they are a disparate collection of tribespeople. As President Karzai put it to me only yesterday, they're country boys. And the plain fact is that they happen to live by a code of honor.
So these are tribes people. They're country boys, and they live by a code of honor, almost implying like that's a good thing on its face. Now, code of honor can be anything. You can have a code of honor that is horrifying, and there are many examples of that. But he continues to sort of say, this is maybe not so bad of a group.
Standard, which has been their standard for many, many years. It's called Pashtun Wali. It has honor at the heart of what they do. They are bound together by a common purpose, which is they don't like corrupt governance. They don't like governance that is self-serving. And they want an Afghanistan that is inclusive for all.
Wow. I mean, that's sounding pretty good, right? I mean, it's all about honor. These are country boys. They're very much against corruption. Well, corruption's bad, so being against corruption must be good. And they're for inclusion. I mean, that's all pretty good stuff, right? Now, while in power in Afghanistan, when you look at the history, the Taliban became notorious for their misogyny and their violence against women, period, forcing full burqa wearing at all times, systematic gender segregation, women not allowed to work, women not allowed to be educated past age 8, only allowed to go to a male doctor if they have a male chaperone to take them, public floggings and executions for women for violating Taliban law, occasionally forcing into child marriage, and on and on and on. So maybe he's saying it would be different now or something, but we don't actually have reason to think that that's the case. So let's continue here.
So I think rather than talking
Except
about
women.
What?
Except women.
Well, again, I think we have to wait and see. I mean, I don't know what they mean.
We can't support the way that they treat women. We surely.
Well, I think you have to listen to what they're saying at the moment, and I think you have to listen to the facts on the ground.
They're saying
they
that
are
women have to
definitely.
abide by
They are
Sharia.
What they're saying is using this coded language about the involvement of women in society as dictated by religious law, right? And so you have to understand that that's an extraordinarily cynical way to talk about inclusion.
Law.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's anything that you and I would approve of particularly.
I'm just clarifying that.
Absolutely, but I do
And I'll go back just a second because Sharia law is mentioned here.
Facts on the ground.
I'm saying they are definitely abide by Sharia law.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's anything that you and I would approve of particularly.
I'm just clarifying that.
Absolutely, but I do think that they have changed. I think they recognise that over the course of the last 20 years, Afghanistan has evolved. They recognise the fundamental role that women have played in that evolution. And yes, they at the moment will undoubtedly say that they want to respect women's rights under Islamic law, and that will be a Sharia law. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't allow them to be involved in government and in education and in medicine and those things that they need them to be involved in.
Now, I don't want to just slam this guy. There's an aspect of this that I think, I am not for Sharia law. I'm not for any religious law being the government law, civil law. Okay, but no matter what it is, I don't want the Christian version of Sharia that some of these right wingers want in the US. I'm against Sharia law. But if we're going to have a more nuanced understanding of this, Sharia can mean different things in different places, and we have to understand that. Like, for example, there's full Sharia criminal law, which is outrageous. I mean, just completely outrageous. There's also Sharia law like in Egypt, okay, where the penal and civil codes are basically based on 19th century French law, as is the case in many parts of the world. But there is Sharia law in the country in some more general religious kind of mix with the government. But the penal code, the civil law, is still based on 19th century French law. So the point here is, it's true that Sharia law is not one thing. But there's no reason to think, based on the history of the Taliban, that they would go in the direction of Egypt. Historically, the Taliban has gone more in the direction of full Sharia criminal law. Let's look just the last few seconds of this clip.
So I think we have to be patient. We have to give them the space to show how they are going to step up to the plate. And whether or not we can work with them will very much depend upon how they treat all Afghans.
Okay, so it's sort of just like a weird soft apologetics for the Taliban. And this is just one example. And to be clear, I'm not saying the Taliban's bad, so we got to send troops in. No, I'm glad the troops are coming out, even though some now went back in. We talked about that yesterday. But some of the weird apologetics that we're seeing for the Taliban, absent any reason to think that the Taliban has really changed, I just find bizarre. So I want to hear from you about this. We're going to have more coverage of this story on the David Pakman Show Instagram, which you can find at David Pakman Show. While you're there, you can also follow me on Instagram at david.pakman. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpakman.com. All right, so I think something is going on this week from the standpoint of the former President Donald Trump and Trump supporters. I want to go over it with you right now. As many of you might remember, August was supposedly a very important month for many Trump supporters when Donald Trump was supposedly going to be reinstated. Of course, it's not going to happen, but Donald Trump is going to be speaking at a rally in Cullman, Alabama this Saturday after being basically missing from the public in any real way for about a month. And in the lead up to this rally on Saturday, at which, now listen to this, there are some Trump supporters who believe Trump will be reinstated at the rally in Alabama Saturday. I mean, just, we don't even have to delve into that. But Donald Trump has done a couple of interviews in the last couple of days with Sean Hannity, which we'll look at first, and then with Maria Bartiromo, which we will look at second. This first interview, I really don't know what to make of this. Donald Trump looks like he either just woke up. People email me saying Trump actually seemed senile in this interview. Trump is rumpled. He's disheveled. His right eye is, again, almost completely swollen shut, which seems to be pretty common now in the interviews. He just looks like he woke up as the interview was starting and started answering the first question, which made very little sense. Let's just jump right in.
Well, it's good to be with you, Sean, but it's a terrible time for our country. I don't think in all of the years our country has ever been so humiliated. I don't know, would you call it a military defeat or a psychological defeat? There's never been anything like what's happened here.
Now, if you're wondering what the hell is he talking about, he's talking about leaving Afghanistan, which is exactly what he planned to do. He just ran out of time to do it.
You can go back to Jimmy Carter with the hostages.
Yeah. So the hostages were definitely something that Trump looked at very strongly. That right eye almost swollen shut, Trump making absolutely no sense. And then it goes from strange optics to strange substance, with Trump claiming that the Taliban has been fighting for 1,000 years. The Taliban was formed in 1994. What is this guy talking about?
Oh, we did a terrible thing, but think of what's happening now. I've heard as many as 40,000 Americans, and the Taliban, good fighters, I will tell you, they're good fighters. We have to give them credit for that. They've been fighting for 1,000 years. That's what they do, is they fight.
So praising the Taliban, but also 1,000 years.
Taliban has circled the airport, and who knows if they're going to treat us right. You know, all of it.
Yeah. So making very, very little sense. Then, as if that's not weird enough, in the next segment, this is a 90-second Trump rant related to the criticisms of how Trump planned to do the same thing Biden did in Afghanistan, but he's incoherent and he's slurring, and I can't tell what point he's trying to make.
I thought it would maybe run through bureaucracy. It doesn't. You need somebody up there that they're going to respect. So when they say, oh, he talked to the Taliban, you remember they were criticizing me. They criticized me when I talked to Kim Jong-un. Well, President Biden told me it's the single biggest problem we have. I said, have you ever called him? Have you ever
I mean, listen, the criticism of his conversation with Kim Jong-un was Trump thought that the concessions Kim Jong-un made mattered, that they had any substance behind them, when they're the same concessions that North Korean leaders have been pretending to make to the U.S. for 40 years. And other presidents know not to fall for them. Trump fell for it. That was the criticism.
No, I haven't. He did try, but it was not receptive on the other side. But it was receptive with me. Now, we were supposed to have a war, and probably a very big nuclear war. I get along with him great, and I got along with him great. Okay. He doesn't like Biden much, I'll tell you that. But
supposedly this is about Afghanistan.
Along with him great. And we had no problems. You remember that. We were virtually, remember the big button versus the little button and the whole thing. We get along great. We had a very good relationship. We met, we got no credit for that one. No problem.
Well, he accomplished nothing.
By the way, South Korea, I got them to pay billions of dollars, billions. We're protecting South Korea. They're very wealthy. They built the ships. They build the televisions. They do everything. They're very rich. They were paying us nothing. I got them to pay billions and billions of dollars because we're protecting them from North Korea. And I had a very good relationship.
Okay, so supposedly that was about Afghanistan, but then he's talking about Kim Jong-un and all sorts of just completely free. It's free association. It's almost Freudian in nature, where the interviewer, the whole thing, Hannity is asking questions, but he would almost get the same stuff if he took a Freudian approach where the psychotherapist says almost nothing and doesn't even steer the conversation at all. Okay, we'll continue. Then the vaccine comes up and Trump says, yeah, the vaccine is good, but freedom is important. And, if you want, wear your mask, but yeah, freedom is important.
But I would love people to take the vaccine. In the meantime, wear your mask if you want, but
if you want,
again, you want your freedoms. You have to have your freedoms.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I guess all else being equal, sure, get vaccinated, but freedom. And, if you want, wear your mask, but freedom. The freedom part is really, really important. And then Donald Trump says, now, I genuinely don't understand this. It seems that Hannity asks Trump, what would you do if you were president right now? And Trump seems to say, I can't tell you if I'm running because of campaign finance. I've watched this clip 5 times. I think that's what happened. See if you can figure it out.
Are you considering a run again in 2024? I'll let you answer it any way you want, but I'll go back to our original question.
So Hannity mentions the 24, but then he goes to a question.
Now that we have all these Americans behind enemy lines, do you have, in the 45 seconds we have left, What would you do now to help with that specific situation?
So because the campaign finance laws are extremely complicated and unbelievably stupid, I'm actually not allowed to answer that question. Can you believe it? I'd love to answer it. But let me put it this way. I think you'll be happy. And I think a lot of our...
Now, that's not true. Trump can say whether his intention is to run or not. What he may be referring to in his weird free association Cloud9 sort of way is that there may be additional scrutiny upon all the money being donated to him if he were to say that he's running. But Trump's free to tell us if he intends to run or not. It's weird that he keeps repeating that. OK, here now we get, I guess, to the answer about what would he do.
Friends will be very happy, but I'm not actually allowed to answer it. It makes it very difficult if I do. So people, you're going to be happy because I love this country and I hate to see what's happening.
Would you be willing to?
OK, so Trump won't tell us what he would do. And he also won't tell us whether he's running. This man is worshipped by tens of millions of Americans. And that's a really, really scary thought. So that was on Hannity. Bizarre, rumpled, crumpled, disheveled, swollen interview. And all of this leading up to this rally he's doing on Saturday. Let's go next to his interview yesterday with Fox host Maria Bartiromo. So now we're going to get to the second interview that Trump did in the last couple of days. This one was with total pro-Trump sycophant Maria Bartiromo of Fox News and Fox Business fame. I've talked before, when I was starting to get into following the stock market and learning about that type of thing and personal finance, etc. Maria Bartiromo was really a groundbreaking reporter on CNBC, first woman to report from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and she would do good interviews with CEOs and ask real questions. Somehow now she's just a Trump brown-noser spreading conspiracy theories and screaming. And the theme of this interview is really revisionist history. Here is Donald Trump claiming COVID was over when I left office. Now, that's not true. You might remember that wasn't true. But let's listen.
Same time, some people don't want to take it. And, when I was president, you didn't have this problem with people not wanting to take it. They don't take it because they don't trust Biden and they don't trust the Biden administration.
Now, let's add some reality to this issue. When Donald Trump left office, 900,000 people a day were getting vaccines. It was almost exclusively healthcare workers and the oldest and most health compromised. Nobody was really in a position of deciding whether or not to get the vaccine because there were almost no vaccines available when Donald Trump left office.
When I was president, you didn't have people protesting the vaccine.
Because there was no vaccine to get.
Just think back. Everybody wanted to get it. And we were giving out over 1 million shots a day.
Now, Trump's lying about 1 million a day. It was 900,000, overstating it by more than 10%. But also the issue there about people weren't protesting and everybody wanted to get it. People weren't protesting because there weren't yet enough vaccines available for it to be a thing. And number two, it's not true everyone wanted to get it. In fact, more people when Trump left office said, I'm never getting the vaccine. The number of anti-vaxxers has declined since Trump left office. Everything he's saying here is a lie.
We had that thing rocking, and he's now president, and he's doing a lousy job at coronavirus. Coronavirus is back. If that ever happened to me where it came back, okay, when I left, it was virtually gone. It was over. It was a path.
Now, that's a lie. The last day Trump was in office, more than 4,000 people died of COVID. We now are back up to about 1,000 a day dying of COVID. It's a disaster. It's a tragedy. And much of it is because of anti-vaxxerism. How was it over when more than 4,000 people died on the day Trump left office?
Now it's coming back through the Delta. And I don't know if you even want to call it that. All you call it is the China virus is back. And so why is he doing a good job? He did a bad job with SARS, the H1N1, very bad job.
Remember, the Obama-Biden had 2/3 approval on the H1N1.
Joke of a job, a horrible job. All of a sudden they said, oh, he's doing so well.
And remember, H1N1 was essentially no more serious than the flu. Like, we stopped testing for it once we realized that. Okay, so Trump, totally incoherent there. Then Trump says communism. It's communism. What is communism? Editorial decisions are communism.
Stolen from him, and he's yes, I know the tape.
Yeah, they can blackmail
Yeah.
him, stolen by a Russian. He was sitting there with some woman. I don't know who the hell the woman. And
What?
she didn't have clothes on, and neither did he. This would have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the biggest scandal in history. And now they don't put it on. I'm telling you, this is communism. What they do is they don't put things on.
Not airing a story is communism, guys. Don't you understand? In fact, last week I was on vacation. I didn't air a story about Afghanistan because I wasn't here. That was communism. Yeah.
It's if something's
Right.
bad about Biden, they don't put it on.
Yep.
If something's bad about me, they make it 10 times worse than they put it on. If something's good about me,
Well, we know that's right.
Yes,
We know.
that's right, Maria. Very important analysis there. Then Trump suggests, without any evidence, that we don't really need booster shots. I told you at the top of the show that the FDA is now saying basically at the 8-month mark from receiving your second COVID dose, you should get a third dose. That's going to start very soon. Trump downplays that and he's like, it's just money making for Pfizer.
It's a
he's an
great
example.
point. It's a great
So when
point,
you
but
get the vaccine,
I still come back
you
to the
get better.
idea. I still come back to the idea of a booster shot. I mean, yes, you're right. The
Well,
vaccines
that sounds
work.
to me
We've
like
seen
a money
that.
making. That sounds. You know what? That sounds to me like a money making operation for Pfizer. Okay, think of the money involved.
Getting
An
a
extra
booster.
shot. That's tens of billions of dollars. How good a business is that? If you're a pure businessman, you say, you know what? Let's give them another shot. That's another $10 billion of
Insanely dangerous comment.
money coming in. The whole thing is just crazy. It doesn't. You wouldn't think you would need a booster. You know, when these first came out, they were good for life. Then they were good for a year or two, and I could see the writing on the wall. I could see the dollar signs in their eyes of that guy that runs Pfizer.
Now, of course, there's so many deceptions there. First of all, dollar signs in the eyes of the guy who runs Pfizer. Trump handpicked Pfizer as the company that he was going to pre-purchase vaccines from in his big heroic vaccine delivery. Is Trump saying that his judgment is so bad that he did business with a profit monger that is Pfizer? And of course, the entire thing about the duration of the vaccine, a lot of what's going on is that the virus is changing. The vaccine was tailored to what was out there when the vaccine was made. And at this point, that's over a year ago that was formulated. And the virus is changing. So the decreased efficacy is, of course, against Delta. It's just all crazy. And people hear this stuff and they believe it, which is the really dangerous thing. Okay. Last thing here. This is Trump just saying things. He seems to be saying he kind of like indirectly threatened Chinese President Xi. It's very weird.
It's very bad. You know, I had a great relationship with President Xi. It's good as anybody's ever had. Really a good relationship. I spent a lot of time with him.
Yeah.
I was over there. He toured me China and places that
He toured him.
were incredible, actually. And I said it would be a terrible thing if we ever fought. It would be a terrible thing if these beautiful places were ever blown up.
Be terrible if your entire country here was blown up one day, President Xi. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. What a bizarre series of interviews. And the real question is, what is the point of all this? What is Trump building towards, clearly reappearing in advance of his rally in Alabama Saturday night, which we'll be covering live? What is happening here? What is Trump building towards? Let me know your thoughts and we'll be right back. If you value what we do at the David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Sometimes you can sort of feel like you're riding a propaganda wave from right-wing media. One example would be the hydroxychloroquine wave, where it built and built and built, where everybody was talking about it, Fox News and Donald Trump, and everybody's hydroxy, and then all of a sudden the wave crashes, and that's it. Hydroxychloroquine, nobody ever talks about it again. And right now, the propaganda wave is around the Regeneron monoclonal antibody treatment for COVID. as an alternative to the vaccine, as something that tells us you don't really have to worry that much because we've got the monoclonal antibodies available for whoever needs them. And case in point, on Fox and Friends, one of the three hosts, Ainsley Earhart, big purveyor of propaganda, falsely claimed that since you can get the Regeneron treatment after getting infected, that's basically like getting vaccinated. Now, that's completely untrue. Again, the context of the clip is Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who tested positive in Texas. We covered that story, talked about it. Let's listen to what Ainsley Earhart had to say.
You know what's interesting? Greg Abbott, he's in our prayers this morning because he announced that he tested positive for COVID yesterday. He has been vaccinated and he's still got COVID, but I think he's doing okay.
By the way, that's always like a slight hit at the vaccine. Vaccinated and still got it.
Getting the Regeneron.
No symptoms, he said.
What's interesting, though, is if you don't get vaccinated and you go to the hospital, most of the time you're going to get Regeneron. But Regeneron are the antibodies. So you're basically still getting vaccinated because they're sticking you with an antibody.
Right. Regeneron is the antibodies. So you're still basically getting vaccinated because they're sticking you with the antibodies.
Is the virus.
So guess what they're doing in this terribly run city? They are deciding you can't go to plays, you can't go to movies, you can't go to bars, you can't go to restaurants, you can't go to gyms, can't go to anything unless you have your vaccination card, which takes $1 to make a knockoff card, or there's a different.
Look at Brian Kilmeade mentioning, by the way, you can make a fake vaccination card for $1. That's a crime. We'll get back to that. But this is becoming all the rage. Here is Sean Hannity on Fox News last night. He's trying to talk about monoclonal antibodies. He calls them monoclonal antibodies. Very aggressive.
To build these monoclonal antibody centers.
It's a big issue of colonization, guys, actually. It's a big thing. Okay, so let's talk about it. Now they're saying vaccine. What about the Regeneron treatment? So first of all, the Regeneron treatment is only emergency use authorized by the FDA. All of these people saying, listen, if I get sick, I'll get the antibodies, and that's safer than an experimental, unapproved COVID vaccine. The vaccine is authorized by the FDA under an emergency use authorization. It's not fully authorized. The Regeneron monoclonal antibody treatment is likewise authorized under emergency use. If you look at the fact sheet, it says, is this approved by the FDA to treat or prevent COVID? And the answer is no. This is an investigational drug. It is not currently FDA approved to treat or prevent any disease or condition, including COVID-19. The Regeneron treatment is only authorized under an EUA. And it also says it is not a replacement for vaccination against COVID-19. In the same fact sheet, it says post-exposure prophylaxis with the antibody treatment is not a substitute for vaccination against COVID-19. So this is just the new thing. It's the new fad. It's the new propaganda wave that they're riding. Regeneron. And by the way, it just so happens that a whole bunch of elected officials have financial interests in Regeneron. So make of that what you will. We're not necessarily saying anything about that, but that's another thing. Last thing, I want to play again for you. This is Brian Kilmeade mentioning you can get a fake vaccine card for $1.
Can't go to anything unless you have your vaccination card, which takes $1 to make a knockoff card, or there's a different.
So there's Brian Kilmeade talking about it's cheap to get a fake vaccine card. Now, remember, the vaccine itself is free. OK, so no matter how little you pay for a fake vaccine card, the vaccine itself is free, and the paper won't protect you. The actual vaccine will. But I want to remind people, it is a crime to have or to make or present for use a fake CDC vaccination card. The unauthorized use of an official government agency's seal, like the CDC or the HHS, is a crime. It may be punishable under Title 18 of USC Section 1017 and other applicable laws. If you believe or you know or have information about somebody faking a vaccine card, particularly and then using it for something where only vaccinated people are supposed to be or do or whatever the case may be, you can call 1-800-HHS-TIPS, or you can go to the Internet Crime Complaint Center at ic3.gov. You can also call your local district attorney, state attorney general. You can try local police, how much they'll know, what to do. I don't really know. You might also end up with an anti-vax police officer taking your call. Who the hell knows? But the point here is it's against the law. And you can report it 800-HHS-TIPS or ic3.gov. Hey, among all of this bad stuff going on, let me talk briefly about something really exciting. We are approaching 1 billion, that's with a B, 1 billion YouTube views. You might remember that last September, right around September 15th, 14th, 12th, something like that, we hit an important milestone, 1 million YouTube subscriptions, 1 million YouTube subscribers. We are now already almost 40% beyond that. We're almost at 1.4 million subscribers. We've seen 40% subscriber growth in the last 11 months. It's incredible. But now we're moving on to views. You can have tons of subscriptions all over the place, but if those people aren't watching your videos, it's basically worth nothing. And some channels have that situation. Millions of subscribers, almost no views. We are now approaching 1 billion YouTube views. Listen to how nuts the growth is. Last year at this time, our entire channel had 600 million views. The last 400 million views are coming in basically 1 year, which is insane. And I have only you to thank for that. We are now at 989 million views. That's about 10.5 million away from 1 billion. Now, how long is this going to take? We often get 1 million views in a day, but not every day. So it could be 9 days if we had a really strong 9 days. More likely, it would be something like 2 to 2.5 weeks. So what are we doing for this? First of all, we're putting together a fantastic billion view compilation with a nice counter rolling up to 1 billion. It's going to start with old clips and go all the way through. There's going to be classics in there that many of our newer viewers and listeners may never have seen. So we're putting that together. It's going to be like an 8 or 9 minute long clip. Producer Pat's been doing a great job with it, and it's going to be ready. It'll be ready to be triggered by us surpassing 1 billion views. That's number one. Number two, yes, there's going to be a huge membership special at 1 billion. Of course there is. You better believe it. We are going to blow memberships out of here like you wouldn't believe, like nobody's ever seen before. In fact, just get on my newsletter at davidpakman.com to be notified. There's no specific date because we don't know when we're going to hit the billion. And then number three, we want this. We've never tried this before. Okay, here, this is just an idea. We want to try to make a compilation of people from the audience calling into other shows. They can be left-wing shows or right-wing shows, and somehow mentioning David Pakman Show YouTube 1 billion views. It can be just like, hey, you call a friendly show and you might mention, hey, will you be congratulating the David Pakman Show on 1 billion views? It can be trolling of right-wing shows, whatever. Okay, the only thing is just David Pakman Show 1 billion views mentioned during a call-in on other shows. Send them in if you're able to do it. I know many of you are regular callers to all sorts of different shows. Can we get it in front of Mike Lindell? Can we get it? Who knows? Dan Bongino, what all these people, Charlie Spork. And then send us a link. We'll compile it together and hopefully have a funny video in addition to our billion view compilation for you by the, it really should be early in September. Could even maybe be in August. So we'll keep you updated. We are at 989 million on the way to 1 billion. All right. I've been going through a lot of voicemails. I had over 600 voicemails waiting for me when I got back from vacation. And I found one guy. I don't believe we've ever heard from this guy before, but maybe once before, who is convinced it's not going to be August. It might be September or October. Definitely by January 1, Donald Trump will be president again. So says this caller. Now, remember, if you want to call, the number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Take a listen to this.
David Pakman. How's it going, my favorite demon rat? Look, I'm not a very smart man, but it doesn't take a genius to know that this was a rigged election. Trump is coming back, and I don't know if it's going to be in August, September, October, whatever, but it's going to happen. In fact, by the new year, Trump will be back in office, and I can't wait to see your faces when that happens. God bless Trump.
Yeah. So hearing the guy say demon rat, It actually does ring a bell. I think that this guy may actually have called before. That's a delusional Trumpist. And so, again, the question is, it was going to be March and then April and then May and then August. And then now it's August/September. And now this guy's saying, well, definitely by January 1st. One of two things could happen. One is they just push it further. Oh, it's going to be February. It's going to be March. And then eventually it'll be like, well, just vote for Trump 2024. And that's it. It doesn't become violent. The other possibility is that at a certain point, these people go nuts and they actually go out and do real world violence in the streets. And I hope that doesn't happen. That would be horrifying if it did. I don't know which way it's more likely to go, but we did have that report yesterday. Department of Homeland Security is increasingly concerned because of the calls to violence if Trump isn't reinstated that they are seeing from some of these completely delusional, unhinged Trumpists. I'm always hoping for the outcome that skips the violence. We've got a great bonus show for you today. Restaurant owners will be suing New York City and Bill de Blasio over the indoor vaccine mandate. Not all restaurant owners, a group of restaurant owners. They say it puts an undue influence, apparatus, infrastructure that they can't meet. They're saying this is not like checking an ID. We now have to say, is this a real vaccine card? And they are suing because many of them don't want to do it. We'll talk about that. Number two, a new report finds that 61% of Americans paid no federal income tax in 2020. What does this really mean? Are these numbers surprising or not when you understand how federal income tax works? And then lastly, Joe Biden's approval is down below 50% for the first time ever during his presidency. And I don't think it's a surprise as to why that's happening. I think that there has been some disastrous press for him over the Afghanistan situation, although a majority of Americans agree with the action that he took. But the lack of another big legislative accomplishment so far, combined with some bad press about Afghanistan, I am not shocked to see Biden drop below 50%. We'll talk about what it means, the implications, and what the next year has to look like if Democrats want to have a shot at retaining control of the House and Senate in 2020. All of those stories, why am I mentioning them? Because they're on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpacman.com and you will be instantly able to get access to the bonus show. See you then. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Blinkist is the app that helps you become a more well-rounded person by letting you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try it for free and get 25% off a subscription by going to Blinkist.com/David Pakman.